Before we start the talk, has anybody missed my R2D2 hills? Okay, now that we got that done, I can start, right? It's very important, you know. So, hi, yay, thank you for coming. I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy to speak at this conference. And okay, let's begin. So, my name is May. I'm a software engineer. I'm a backend developer at AppsFlyer. And yes, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I don't know if you noticed. I have to tell you that every place I ever worked at, I had to learn a new language, a new development language. And it was never even a thing. It was okay. I mean, going from one language to another, just on the fly, it was okay. And then I got the job at AppsFlyer. And they said, okay, our main development language is Clojure. And I said, well, another language, another syntax, right? Wrong. What is that? And then I said, okay, that's not going to be a problem. What I just started to do is to learn Clojure by reading this wonderful, funny book. It's written by Daniel Higginbotham. I was, sitting there reading a coding book and laughing with myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so geeky. Why am I laughing with this coding book? But it's actually great. It was a great introduction to Clojure. And then after that, I went to the Clojure website, and what they offer is questions in Clojure in different difficulty levels, and it's actually good for you if you want to get to know the different functions that Clojure has to offer. But still, I didn't feel that I can speak Clojure. I wasn't there yet. And just like Yoda said, much to learn in Clojure. You still have my young Padawan. And Yoda's right. So before I'll tell you how I came to learn Clojure eventually, I really want to tell you about how I learned Java over a weekend. I mean, okay, let's stop right there. I did not learn Java over one weekend. But what I did learn was a lot about Java. I learned about how to use Java. I learned about how you can code something in Java, what Java has to offer, and about OOP programming. And why did I do that? So let me tell you a little story. On a Friday morning, I got a call from a recruiter who said, hey, we want to offer you a job in Java. And I was like, okay, I don't know Java, but we'll see. And they scheduled the interview to Sunday because, yeah, in Israel we work on Sundays. And it's okay after you're used to it. And so I said, okay, what can I do over one weekend to prove to those recruiters, to the interviewers that I can do something over a weekend, that I can start to program, something to get it to work. And then on Sunday morning, I showed them this game. What is this game? It's the calculus game. What is happening in this game, you'll see in just a minute. Okay. Is it working? Yeah. It's a student. The student is trying to avoid exams. But since it's the calculus game, guess what happens to the student at the very ending? Wait for it. Of course. And I mean, what was so good about this game was that I learned not only to code a little bit in Java, was also that I learned how to use threads. I learned how to handle data structures. And I learned how to get input from the user. And it was just great because it was a small amount of code, but it was very efficient to get things going and to feel comfortable with Java by just one weekend. And so after I was thinking, like, what should happen in that interview, I got the job. Yes. So, you know what? Let's talk about the first game I wrote in Clojure. I said, okay, what do I want to do? I want to prepare a window. I want to have a player in that window. And I don't know, I want something to happen. So here's the first game. Ladies and gentlemen, the first game I ever wrote in Clojure. There's no problem with the presentation. It's just that I got nothing. Over 1, 2, 3 weekends, I sat there And all I got was a black hole, a bunch of parentheses. I was like, what is going on? Why there's no game? But then I got this game ready. What you see over here is a great question. And no matter what you press, you'll get the right answer. So let's take a look at a quick activation of this game. So you're right. And then, again, the egg. Again, you're right. Oh my God, that's awesome. And so when I showed this game to my 10-year-old neighbor, she was like, that's not a game. And I was like, yeah, it is. It's for grown-ups, and you don't understand it. Little girl. But I knew that I lied. I lied to a 10-year-old girl. And that's not very nice. So what was so hard about it? What was so hard about writing a game in Clojure? Why is that different than writing a game in Java? And I'll tell you. If you ignore the joke here, it's because this is what this really is. It changes the way you think. I mean, what does it even mean, that immutability? What is that? I mean, isn't it the whole basic of programming, to change things, to handle data and change the, you know? But no, you just have to change the way you see and think about your code, how you use your data, how you manipulate it. So that's what it's about. That's why it was so hard for me, because I had not only to learn new syntax, not only that I had to see, you know, for loops going recursively, I also had to change the way I think about the way the data flows around in the game. So, if no mistake you've made, losing you are. A different game you should play. And what does it mean? It means that maybe I just need to change the way I handle writing a game in Clojure. So, the journey to Clojure starts. Please, applause, come on. It's a... Thank you, thank you. That's much more appropriate to Clojure start, right? Okay, so what did I do? I thought about this. If I live in a world where there's no GPS and no like great apps that get me to wherever I want, what do? I take a map, I look and I search for my target, and then I circle my target. And then I go and I look for the place where I'm at. And then I plan how I'm going to get to the place that I want. And how I do it, I'm looking for familiar things on the map, and then I mark them. And I know tiny steps, step by step, how I'm going to get to that point. And this is what we're going to do today, like right now. The first thing that you want to do is to learn and be familiar with the structure of a basic 2D game. It's a little bit of information that you can get very quickly, and then you'll use that information to learn something new, which is Clojure. So, what is the basic 2D game structure? Let me first define which basic 2D game. So I'm talking not open world crazy 3D games. I'm talking about Snake, Pac-Man, Infinite Runner, just the one like the one we saw, because you want to use something simple in order to learn something that is more complicated. So let's take a look. The first part of the game, of the structure, is the framework functions. And these are the functions that handle everything that has nothing to do with the logic of the game. So after you got these done, you can actually use them in different games. Like the same functions, you can use them in different games. So for example, you will do the input from the user, because it's always the same, right? If once I wrote the function that I can use for getting the input from the player, that's it. I can use it in other games. So the next thing we want to do is to actually create the game itself, the logic. And it means that moving the player, if it's an infinite runner, maybe it will be by swiping. And maybe if it's a maze, then you'll have to use the arrow keys. So this is, or how do you win, right? If it's the calculus game, you just don't win. But this is the logic of the game right there. And then the last thing is the assets. We talked about the structure of a basic 2D game. Let's move on. Now, the next thing you want to be familiar with is the game loop. So this is how it goes. The first thing that you'll have is initializing the game, which means you want to initialize maybe the position of the player, or if you want to upload the images for the game, this is where you'll do it, in the initialization part. After that, you have literally the game loop, which means that as long as the game is going, this loop is running, right? So first, in the loop, you handle the user input. And after that, you want to update the game entities. So if I press the arrow key and the position of the player is changed, now I want to update it inside the var of the position of the player. And then the last thing you want to do is to draw it to the screen. After you updated the value, you want to draw those values to the screen. And so now that you're familiar with the basic 2D game structure, we can move on to the next step. The next step will be to find a 2D game. And what does it mean? I mean find a game that is already written in Clojure and start from there. And that's completely different than what I did in other languages. In other languages, I just started by writing, searching for things, searching for examples. I did not look for a game already written in that language. But in Clojure, I needed to see something that is already done in Clojure to understand how this language works. So when you look for a 2D game, first you have to find a game that you like, because it will make you happy. And the second thing, you want to find as simple as possible, like a game that is super, super simple. So I highly recommend the PlaySealJ library. It's a great library that actually wraps Java libraries that are written for 2D games and 3D also. And what it gives you is actually a way to write a game in idiomatic Clojure. And so, also, I want to recommend this game, which is just a cow moving around. Let's take a quick look about this game. Yeah, so this cow, I don't know if everyone can see in the back, it's just a cow moving in the forest, collecting apples. It's not the best game in the world, but it's something you can start with, because it's so simple. You know what to expect. You know that if now you're looking at a code written in Clojure, even if you don't know Clojure, you'll be looking, first of all, for the cow, and then you'll be looking for the apples, and you'll be looking for the way that the cow moves from one side to another, and then you'll go look for the way you collect those apples. So there you have it. You know what you're looking for in a code that you're not familiar with. This is what will help you to get into Clojure thinking. So, yeah. So we know the basic 2D game structure. We found a game written in Clojure. And now the next thing that we want to do is to map the game. And when I say map the game is exactly what I explained. We want to use the information that we already have about 2D games and about this game specifically in order to understand the code. Let's do a quick example. Okay, let's say we don't understand what is written here. And actually, this is a real example from my experience, because that's one of the harder things that I had to understand about Clojure. The thread macros, like, okay, the arrows. I mean, I didn't know what they're used for, and even after I read the documentation, I didn't quite get like the context. When will I want to use it? Why is that different from other things? And so let's try to map this one together and see how we can understand just by knowing the basic 2D game structure and what the game is. So we're talking right now about the cow collecting apples. So we have move and collect, which self-explanatory. It gets entities, and it means that it's probably getting the entities of the game. So I think that it's going to contain probably both the player and the apples. So if we move into the function, we look, what we see here is that we get all of the entities together, and inside we have two functions. We have the map function, and then we have the remove and collected object. And it kind of makes sense, because you want to do something with the entities, and then you want the apples to disappear. So you want to remove the collected object from the screen. Let's go deeper. So if we dig deeper into the map function, what we see is this function gets a function, like the map function gets a function, and the function that map gets actually handles one entity at a time. So let's see what it does. Now we have that arrow, the thread macro. So we take one entity, and then what do we do with it? We start by updating the player position, if it's a player. And after we know the new position, which is the result of the update player position, once we know what position that is, we want to check if there was an apple collected. So we use the result from this function. We use it in the update collected list. And now we know what happens here. So after that, we're done updating. Let's see. We go back and we see, OK, this is what the map function is doing for each and every entity of the game. And after that, if any apples were collected, we want to remove them from the screen, and then that's it. That's the entire move and collect function. And we were able to identify and to understand what happens in this function just because we had in the back of our minds what we're looking for. OK, so we started to ask our own questions. Because we had information, we used previous knowledge in order to understand something new, which is what I did in order to learn Clojure. So let's move forward. We started with the basic 2D game structure. We found a game, then we mapped it by ourselves. And after we think we understand the code, the next thing we want to do is to add a feature and not a bug. And what it means is that if we add something to the game and the game still works, nailed it. Oh my God. Now you are completely sure that you understand what you just read. So this is what I did. I took the cow, and now I think that in the back you can't see that I have two huge red arrows that shows you where the cow can go, which means that this cow can only go in two directions. And what I did, the first thing I did with this game is I changed it and I created this little game. So first of all, you can see that I just changed the images. Super easy. It meant that I had to go around the code and see where is the uploading of the images happens. And then I changed it. So let's see that now it's a Clojure astronaut in space collecting little ships, like whatever is collecting. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. But you can see that now I added more directions. And that was a big thing for me. To add these two extra directions that now the player can move up and down, that was a big thing. Because it meant that I had to go to dig deeper into those functions and understand how they work, understand how to handle the maps, and to see that now I can move in 4 directions and not only in 2 directions. And so after I added this little feature, I mean, it looks little, but really, believe me, it took some time to understand how to do it. After I added this feature, I had like a quick win, feeling. So when you feel that you're a winner, you're like, let's roll the dice again. So this is the next game that I did. And I don't know if you can see in the back, it makes me so sad. It's a Pac-Man game. I'll activate the game, and I hope you can see it. So what happens is it's just a simple Pac-Man. Wait, is it working? Yeah. A simple Pac-Man. There are also cherries. I don't know if you can see it, but I worked really hard to have both dots and cherries. And there's also a maze inside. So adding the maze and adding boundaries. Later, if anybody wants to see the game, it's right here. Please come see the game. I worked so hard for it. But yeah, so actually adding the maze and making sure that the Pac-Man can go in between the maze parts and not go out of the boundaries of the screen, all of this meant that I'm digging deeper into Clojure and that I'm handling logic in Clojure, that I'm starting to think, how do I do this logic? How do I make the Pac-Man go in between things? And then, I had to really think how to do that without just using the, old way, how I do it without using the player as just an object, of having like a class of a player. That was weird for me, but that made me do it. And I felt confident enough because I was already familiar with the basic structure of this game, right? It was a cow before, now it's a Pac-Man. I mean, felt great, you know? So, yeah, let's move forward. So that's it. Now, after we added a feature, the next thing that you really want to do is to write a new game. Just something by yourself. But remember the basic thing that you have to do if you want to write something in Clojure and in general. Start with something small and simple. Don't go crazy. Don't try to do, I don't know, crazy games. Try to do something small that you are sure that you can accomplish and you are sure that you can finish, okay? Because this is what will give you the good feeling. We all want to feel good, right? So do something that you're completely sure that you're capable of. Later on, try to, I don't know, create better, crazier games. And so let's see the last game, and I don't know if you can see it, but I hope so. The last game that I'm going to show you today, it's called Snake. And so it's a snake collecting parentheses, and the parentheses are scattered around the screen. And I know maybe you can't see it in the back, but it's a pink snake. He's collecting parentheses, and he has to collect them in a balanced way. Because Clojure, come on. So yeah, the snake goes, he moves around, collecting the parentheses in a balanced way. And then when he will collect them in an imbalanced way, obviously, well, that will be the end of the game. So what did we have today? We talked about how you can learn a new language, and specifically Clojure, by using information that you already have in order to learn something new. And I said, you know, try to achieve small wins because it will give you the confidence to roll the dice once again. And then have fun. That's like the most important thing, right? Dream big. Start with tiny steps. And thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed.